Daring Greatly: How the Courage to Be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead by Brene Brown is a powerful book that explores the concept of vulnerability and its impact on our lives. In this book, Brown argues that vulnerability is not weakness but rather a source of strength and courage that can transform the way we live, love, parent, and lead. The book is divided into 4 parts, each focusing on a different aspect of vulnerability. Part 1 explores the myths and misconceptions surrounding vulnerability and how they prevent us from being vulnerable. Brown argues that we often associate vulnerability with weakness, but in reality, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Part 2 focuses on the importance of vulnerability in relationships. Brown argues that in order to have meaningful connections with others, we must be willing to be vulnerable and open ourselves up to the possibility of rejection. She provides practical advice on how to cultivate vulnerability in our relationships and how to deal with the fear and shame that often come with it. Part 3 focuses on vulnerability in parenting. Brown argues that in order to raise resilient and compassionate children, we must model vulnerability and teach them to embrace their imperfections. She provides practical guidance on how to create a safe and supportive environment for our children to explore their emotions and develop their own sense of self-worth. Part 4 focuses on vulnerability in leadership. Brown argues that in order to be an effective leader, we must be willing to be vulnerable and lead with empathy and compassion. She provides practical advice on how to cultivate vulnerability in the workplace and how to create a culture of openness and trust. Throughout the book, Brown provides numerous examples and anecdotes to illustrate her points, making the concepts easy to understand and relate to. She also provides practical exercises and suggestions for how to apply the concepts in our own lives. One of the key takeaways from this book is the importance of embracing vulnerability. Brown argues that vulnerability is not something to be feared or avoided but rather something to be celebrated and embraced. When we are willing to be vulnerable, we open ourselves up to the possibility of connection, joy, and fulfillment. Another key takeaway is the importance of cultivating self-compassion. Brown argues that in order to be vulnerable and open ourselves up to the possibility of rejection, we must first learn to be kind and compassionate to ourselves. She provides practical exercises and suggestions for how to develop self-compassion and overcome the shame and fear that often prevent us from being vulnerable. Overall, Daring Greatly is a powerful and inspiring book that challenges us to rethink our attitudes towards vulnerability and encourages us to embrace it as a source of strength and courage. It provides practical guidance on how to cultivate vulnerability in our relationships, parenting, and leadership, and offers a roadmap for living a more authentic and fulfilling life.